Story 1. The Vampire of Mouy. Victor Antoine Ardisson was born in 1872 in Le Mouy, France. He worked as an undertaker and gravedigger, a job that gave him access to dead bodies. But Victor wasn't just a regular worker. He had dark, disturbing urges. People later called him the Vampire of Mouy because of the horrible things he did. Victor admitted to committing necrophilia, a sexual attraction to corpses, over 100 times. He mostly targeted the bodies of young women who had just died. At night, he would secretly dig up their graves and take advantage of their corpses. Sometimes, he even cut off body parts or removed heads. One of the most shocking things he confessed was that he kept the head of a 13-year-old girl by his bed. He treated the head like a girlfriend, kissing it, talking to it, and calling it his bride. When the corpses didn't respond to him, he felt hurt and confused, as if he didn't understand why they wouldn't love him back. Victor was arrested in 1901, and doctors studied him closely. A psychiatrist named Dr. Alexis Epillard called him a sadist and necrophile. Another expert, Dr. Kraft Ebing, simply called him a moron without morals. At that time, many people still believed in monsters like vampires, but Victor's case helped shift thinking towards science. He wasn't a creature of legend. He was a very mentally ill man. His actions helped doctors learn more about dangerous mental conditions like necrophilia. The court declared Victor insane, and he was sent to a mental hospital for life. He escaped once in 1901, but was quickly caught again. He stayed locked up for over 40 years, until he died there in 1944. Victor Ardisson's case is a disturbing reminder that jobs dealing with death, like working in funeral homes or cemeteries, can sometimes attract people with very dark desires. Story 2. The Man Who Tried to Live with the Dead. Karl Tanzler, also known as Count Karl von Kossel, was not a killer like Victor Ardisson, but his story is just as disturbing. Maybe even more. Because it came from a place of obsession and twisted love. Karl was born in Germany and later moved to the US, where he worked as a radiology technician at a hospital in Key West, Florida during the 1930s. He believed he had seen the face of his true love in visions since he was a child, a dark-haired woman who he thought was his destiny. In 1930, a young Cuban-American woman named Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos came into the hospital. Karl believed she was the woman from his visions. Elena, only 21 years old, had tuberculosis, a deadly disease at the time. Karl became obsessed with her. He tried to cure her with both real and fake treatments, but there's no proof she ever loved him back. Sadly, Elena died on October 25, 1931. Karl paid for her funeral and had a fancy stone mausoleum built just for her. He was the only one with the key and visited her grave every night for 2 years. Then, one night in 1933, Karl claimed Elena's spirit came to him and begged him to take her out of the grave. So he did. Karl took her decaying body home using a toy wagon. Over the next several years, he tried to preserve her in horrifying ways. He used wire and coat hangers to hold her bones together. He made fake skin from silk wax and plaster. He gave her glass eyes, made a wig from her real hair, and filled her body with rags to keep its shape. He dressed her like a doll and kept her in his bed. He even used perfumes and disinfectants to hide the smell of decay. He lived with her like this for 7 years. In 1940, Elena's sister found out and called the police. Karl was arrested, but because too much time had passed, the law couldn't charge him with grave robbery. What happened next shocked everyone. Instead of being treated like a monster, Carl became somewhat of a local celebrity. Some people even thought his actions were romantic. Elena's body was put on public display and over 6,000 people came to see it. Eventually, she was reburied in a secret grave to protect her remains. Carl later made a life-size doll of Elena using a death mask and lived with it until he died alone in 1952. Story 3. Burke and Hare, Killing for Cadavers. In 1828, two men in Edinburgh, Scotland, William Burke and William Hare, became famous for one of the most gruesome crimes in history. At a time when doctors needed dead bodies to study anatomy, Burke and Hare found a horrifying way to make money. Instead of digging up graves, they started killing people. Back then, medical schools had very few legal ways to get bodies for dissection. Only executed criminals could be used, and that wasn't enough. So, a group of criminals called resurrection men started digging up freshly buried bodies to sell to doctors. Burke and Hare were two poor Irish immigrants living in Edinburgh. Their dark journey began in November 1827, when a man staying at Hare's boarding house died owing rent. Instead of burying him, they sold his body to a well-known doctor named Dr. Robert Knox for over £7. They realized they could make a lot of money this way. But instead of waiting for people to die, they decided to speed up the process. When another guest became sick, they got him drunk and smothered him. This left no marks, so the body looked like he had died naturally. This new killing method became known as burking. Over the next year, Burke and Hare murdered at least 16 people. They targeted the poor, lonely, and vulnerable, people no one would miss. Dr. Knox paid them between £8 and £15 for each body, which was a lot at the time. Their last victim was a woman named Mary Docherty. On Halloween night in 1828, other boarders found her body under a bed and went to the police. The authorities searched Knox's anatomy school and identified her body. The evidence wasn't strong enough at first, so the government made Hare a deal. If he told the truth and testified against Burke, he would go free. Hare agreed. Burke was hanged in front of a massive crowd of 25,000 people on January 28, 1829. In a fitting twist of fate, his body was dissected publicly just like the people he helped kill. His skeleton is still on display in a museum in Edinburgh today. Hare was never punished and disappeared soon after. Dr. Knox wasn't charged, but his career was ruined. Public outrage over these murders helped change the law. In 1832, the British government passed the Anatomy Act, which allowed medical schools to use unclaimed bodies from poorhouses. This ended the need for grave robbing and murders for science. Story 4. The London Burkers, Copycat Killers. Just 3 years after Burke was hanged in Scotland, a new group of killers appeared in London. They copied Burke and Hare's terrible idea: kill people and sell their bodies to medical schools. People started calling them the London Burkers. This gang was led by John Bishop and Thomas Williams. Bishop had been stealing bodies from graves for over 12 years. He claimed to have sold between 500 and 1,000 corpses. But by 1831, cemeteries were being guarded more carefully, and it became harder to dig up fresh bodies. So, Bishop and his gang decided to start killing instead. They rented 2 small houses in Bethnal Green, a poor neighborhood in East London. They lured poor people inside with offers of food or drink. Then, they would drug them with rum mixed with laudanum, a strong opium drug, and drown them head first in a well in the garden. This left the bodies looking untouched, perfect for medical use. Their plan worked for a while, until they brought the body of a 14-year-old boy to King's College School of Anatomy. The man there, Richard Partridge, noticed the body looked far too fresh, curious. There were no signs of it having been buried. He got suspicious and called the police. The police searched the cottages and found victims' clothes and other proof of more murders. Bishop and Williams were questioned and eventually confessed to killing the boy, named Charles Ferrier, a woman named Frances Pigburn, and another boy named Cunningham. On December 5, 1831, Bishop and Williams were hanged in front of 30,000 people at Newgate Prison. Like Burke before them, their bodies were sent to medical schools for public dissection, a grim form of justice. The London Burkers made people even more afraid. It felt like no one was safe, especially the poor. Their crimes, combined with the Burke and Hare murders, pushed Parliament to pass the Anatomy Act of 1832, which gave doctors a legal way to get bodies and finally helped end the era of body snatching and murder for science. Story 5. The Doctors' Riot, when New Yorkers fought back. In 1788, a shocking riot broke out in New York City. It was called the Doctors' Riot, and it happened because people were furious about grave robbing. Back then, medical students often stole bodies from cemeteries so they could practice surgery and anatomy. But this time, the public had had enough. It started when a boy was playing near New York Hospital. He looked through a window and saw a medical student waving a human arm at him, joking, "This is your mother's arm. I just dug it up." Sadly, the boy's mother had just died, and when the family dug up her grave, they found it empty. The news spread fast. People were outraged. Hundreds of angry New Yorkers marched to the hospital. They broke in, smashed equipment, and took body parts out to bury them properly. Doctors and students ran for their lives, many hiding in the city jail to stay safe. But the crowd didn't calm down. The next day, the mob had grown to nearly 5,000 people. They attacked Columbia College, Doctors' Home, and even tried to break into the jail where the doctors were hiding. Governor George Clinton called in the state militia. Famous men like John Jay, a future Chief Justice, tried to talk to the crowd, but were attacked with bricks and stones. Jay was knocked out cold. When things got too dangerous, the militia fired their guns into the crowd, killing at least 6 people and injuring many others. This riot wasn't just about grave robbing. It was also about class and race. Wealthy families could afford to protect their graves, but the poor, especially free and enslaved black people, had no such protection. Their burial grounds were the main targets for body snatchers. After the riot, trust in doctors was badly shaken. In response, New York passed its first laws to regulate how bodies could be legally used for science. The riot became a turning point in the long fight between medicine, ethics, and the rights of the dead. Story 6. The slave forced to steal bodies for science. In the American South, grave robbing was often tied to slavery. One of the darkest examples is the story of Grandison Harris, an enslaved man bought by a medical school to dig up bodies. In 1852, the 7 professors at the Medical College of Georgia in Augusta did something shocking. They went to a slave market in Charleston and bought Grandison Harris. His official job title was porter and janitor, but that was just a cover. His real job was to steal dead bodies, and he had no choice. Because he was enslaved, Harris couldn't say no. The white doctors made him do the dirty work, while they stayed clean and avoided punishment. Harris became an expert grave robber. The doctors taught him to read and write, so he could check local newspapers for funeral announcements. He developed an incredible memory and could remember exactly how flowers were arranged on graves. After digging up a body, he would carefully fix the grave so no one would notice. His main targets were graves in Cedar Grove Cemetery, where many poor and black people were buried. In the black community, Harris was feared like a ghost or monster, a real-life night doctor. But strangely, he also had some power. He was educated, had a secure position, and threw big parties. He lived in a strange place between terror and respect. After the Civil War ended, Harris was freed. but instead of leaving, he came back to work for the college, this time as a paid employee. He continued working there for more than 50 years until he died in 1911. The true horror of his work came to light in 1989 when construction workers were renovating the old medical building. In the basement, they found a huge pit filled with over 10,000 human bones, the remains of the bodies Harris had dug up. His story is a chilling reminder that American medicine once relied not just on stolen bodies, but also on the forced labor of enslaved people, like Grandison Harris. Story 7. The Surgeon and the Stolen Body. Most doctors in the body-snatching era tried to stay away from the actual grave robbing. But one surgeon, Dr. Granville Sharp Pattison, got caught up in it directly. In 1813 in Glasgow, Scotland, a wealthy woman named Mrs. McAllister died and was buried in a churchyard. Not long after, her body was found on a dissection table in Pattison's classroom. This shocked everyone, because grave robbers usually targeted poor people, not rich families. Mrs. McAllister's family was powerful, and they wanted justice. The case became a big deal. To convict Pattison, prosecutors needed to prove that the body really was Mrs. McAllister's. For the first time in history, they used dental records to do it, by matching her teeth to earlier impressions. This was a major moment in forensic science, but even with that evidence, Pattison wasn't found guilty. Scottish law allowed for a special verdict called not proven. That meant the jury believed there wasn't enough proof to convict, but also didn't believe he was truly innocent. So, Pattison walked free, but his name was stained forever. Even though he avoided punishment, Pattison's reputation in Scotland was damaged. So, he moved to the United States. There, he rebuilt his career and became a well-known professor at New York University. He died in 1851 and was buried back in Scotland. This case showed how close the line could be between respected scientists and the criminals they relied on. Even doctors who tried to stay respectable were still deeply connected to the shady business of stolen bodies. Story 8. The plot to steal Abraham Lincoln's body. In 1876, 11 years after President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, a group of criminals came up with a wild plan. They were going to steal Lincoln's body and demand ransom. The plan was led by James Big Jim Keneally, a Chicago counterfeiter whose money printing operation had fallen apart after the government arrested his best engraver, Benjamin Boyd. Keneally thought if he could steal Lincoln's body, he could force the government to release Boyd and give him $200,000 in gold. Keneally recruited two men, Terrence Mullen and Jack Hughes, to break into Lincoln's tomb in Springfield, Illinois. They also brought in a third man, Louis Swegels, who they didn't know was actually a spy for the Secret Service. They chose election night, November 7th, 1876, to pull off the heist, thinking police would be too busy. That night, they broke into the tomb, pried open the sarcophagus, and started lifting Lincoln's heavy coffin. Swegels left to get the wagon, but instead, he told the Secret Service agents and detectives hiding nearby. The plan should have ended there, but things went wrong. The agents panicked, and one accidentally fired his gun. The noise caused confusion, and the two thieves escaped into the night. They were arrested 10 days later in Chicago. At the time, grave robbing was only a minor crime in Illinois, so the men were sentenced to just 1 year in prison. Still, the failed robbery shocked the country. Lincoln's family didn't take any more chances. His son, Robert Lincoln, had the body reburied in a steel cage, covered with 10 feet of concrete, so it could never be stolen again. Story 9. The Stolen Body of Charlie Chaplin. In 1978, the world was shocked when someone stole the body of Charlie Chaplin, the famous movie star known for his silent comedies. The strange crime felt like something out of one of his own films. Part crime story, part dark comedy. Two men, Roman Wardez, a 24-year-old from Poland, and Ganczko Ganev, a 38-year-old from Bulgaria, were unemployed car mechanics living in Switzerland. They came up with a desperate plan. Dig up Chaplin's body and ask his family for ransom money. On March 1st, 1978, just over 2 months after Chaplin died, they went to the cemetery in Corsier-sur-Vevey, Switzerland. They dug up his heavy oak coffin, put it in their car, and reburied it in a cornfield in a nearby village. Soon after, they called Chaplin's widow, Una Chaplin, and demanded $600,000, but Una refused to pay. She later told reporters that Charlie would have found the whole thing sarcastic, ridiculous. Meanwhile, the police launched a huge investigation. They tapped the Chaplin family's phone and kept watch on about 200 public phones in the area. After 5 weeks, the police finally caught Wardez and Ganev. But the men couldn't remember exactly where they buried the coffin. The police had to bring in metal detectors to search the cornfield. Eventually, they found Chaplin's body and returned it to his grave. This time, the Chaplin family buried the coffin inside a thick concrete vault so it could never be stolen again. Wardez was sentenced to 4.5 years of hard labor, and Ganev received a suspended sentence. The whole story became famous around the world, a mix of crime, comedy, and deep disrespect. Story 10. The Long Journey of Eva Perón's Body. Of all the strange stories about stolen bodies, none is more emotional and political than the story of Eva Perón, also known as Evita. Her body was hidden, stolen, and moved around for 16 years. All because of politics. Eva Perón was the first lady of Argentina and beloved by millions, especially the poor. When she died of cancer in 1952, her husband, President Juan Perón, wanted her body preserved forever. He hired a famous embalmer, Dr. Pedro Ara, to make her body look perfect, planning to build a grand tomb where people could visit her. But in 1955, a military coup overthrew President Perón. The new leaders feared that Eva's body, a powerful symbol of the working class, could inspire protests or rebellion. So, they stole her body and tried to make it disappear. At first, they hid the body in random places. One officer kept it in his attic. In a horrible accident, he thought someone was trying to steal the body and ended up shooting his pregnant wife by mistake. Later, another officer named Colonel Hector Cabanillas secretly sent Eva's body to Italy with help from the Vatican. It was buried under a fake name in a cemetery in Milan, where it stayed hidden for 14 years. In 1970, a rebel group killed the man who originally ordered the body's removal and demanded to know where Eva was buried. To calm the situation, the military gave the body to Juan Perón, who was living in Spain at the time. When Juan Perón returned to power in 1973, he left Eva's body in Spain. After he died in 1974, the new government brought the body back to Argentina and gave it to Eva's family. Finally, after 16 years of being treated like a political object, Eva Perón's body was laid to rest in the Duarte family tomb in La Recoleta Cemetery, Buenos Aires, where it remains today, safe and undisturbed.